Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another another episode of A Giant Issue with Coach Gene Clements, episode 3. Thank you to everybody who has been watching episode 1, episode 2. We do this every Monday at 6 p.m. So before we do anything, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you'll know every time we are starting, regardless of what you're doing with your day. It was a great weekend for more than one reason. Shout out to the New York Rangers who were able to get it done. That's a beautiful thing. But we also got a chance to take our first look at the Giants rookies. And, I wasn't there. I would have loved to have been there, but, life happens. But you know who was there? The man who's everywhere, Mr. Day 3 himself, Emory Hunt. The czar of the playbook, football game plan. You know him well. He joins me right now. Emory, thank you for joining me, man.
Always a pleasure, man. It was definitely an interesting watch out there at Giants camp this past weekend.
Absolutely. Just before we get in, how much did they put on pads? Were there ever any padded practice at all?
Nah, and I don't know if the CBA kind of limits them in that regard, but it was just shells, just helmets. And practice was actually shorter. It was about 45 minutes to an hour practice on both days. This was the shortest rookie mini camps that I've seen. I've been going to Giants rookie mini camps since 2014. And, so that's covering 3 different coaching regimes. And this was the shortest one in terms of what the rookies were able to do out there on the field.
Yeah, and one thing I know, and I want people to understand when we talk about shells, there's only so much you're going to see. There's only so much you're going to know when we're talking about shells. You don't really get an understanding of physicality when there's no pads on. You can't. It's just the game's too dangerous to even try to go there. A few things that I want to talk about. I know Giants fans are going to be really interested in. The first thing is, how did the blue chippers look? How did Neal look? How did Thibodeau look? Did they look the part out there while they were running around in their t-shirts and shorts? What was your sense of what they looked like out there?
Yeah, they definitely looked the part, man, especially Evan Neal, because he's such a large individual. He's 6'7", 350. Definitely looked the part on the right side, and he talked about him playing on the right side and how he had to, get back to being used to being on that side. And man, he was definitely someone that was legitimately blocking out the sun there in that regard. Thibodeau looks extremely quick off the ball. He doesn't look 255, which is impressive because he is definitely 255, but he is so quick, so athletic. So both guys definitely passed the eyeball test in that regard.
Could you say that Thibodeau could possibly be, and because I've been telling Giants fans to temper their expectations, is there a chance that Thibodeau ends up being like a Jadeveon Clowney, where he continues to just fill out into this frame where, like Clowney and probably like Williams as well, has that versatility to be used all over the defensive line?
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely something that's in the cards, because you could see his frame. You feel like he can carry about 270. And I think he can do that with ease without losing his quickness, his burst, his athleticism. And you can even see a situation where they keep him at 255, 260-ish, where you still have him being able to drop back and carry tight ends or cover backs out the backfield. The dude is super athletic and is a fluid mover, man. It's impressive to see up close how fluid of an athlete he is, which is makes it even more shocking that he fell to number 5 with the New York Giants.
One thing I'll be looking at, I've been talking about it, is that I think there's a chance we could see him as a really interesting movable piece, where you might see him rush from the edge, but you also might see him line up in the inside linebacker and rush from the middle as well, because I believe that the interior blitz is something that's really underrated when it comes to football. It's the reason why I thought the Michael McFadden draft pick was a good draft pick, because he's adept at blitzing up the middle. He's not really a coverage guy, but he could find worth on third down as a blitzer up the middle. Before I move on to anything else, I don't want to go ahead of myself. Neil, we said that Neil addressed playing on the right side and that he's getting back used to playing on the right side. Do you think that's going to be an adjustment for him, or do you think he'll be able to settle in pretty comfortably on the right side?
I think because they drafted him where they drafted him, he's going to be out there getting all the reps. So that transition is going to be a lot easier for him because they're going to. It's not like one of these competitions where they have a guy in place already and they kind of shadow compete, but really you're going to have your rookie be the starter. He is the starter, and they're going to have him out there getting all the reps. So his acceleration to getting back to playing on the right side going to be a lot faster than it was if they were going to have him, in this fake competition.
Understandable. Now, one of the other things I know people are interested in is the other draft picks, and out of that from round 2 through round 7, which one of those guys that would you say looked the most impressive out there running around over the past few days?
I would say Wandell Robinson, to be completely honest, because you can see a pathway to what they're going to do. Um, you know, it was funny that the talk was about the roster on on Friday when we were out there. Everybody's looking at the roster like, wait a minute, they got him listed at 5'11". Clearly, he's not 5'11", like 5'8", And so Saturday they corrected the roster and they had him listed as 5'8". So, I said all that to say he looks like how he was coming out of high school and his first year at Nebraska, where he was a running back, and you saw him lined up in the backfield. You saw him, being motioned out. So he's probably going to be, the move piece in that, offense, and different than what they have in Kadarius Toney. I know a lot of Giants fans were saying they doubled up with similar guys, but they are completely different players. I mean, Toney was a high school quarterback. Wandell was a high school running back. So they see the game differently. So they're going to be their responses are going to be different. So Wandell being moved around, he was able to get deep a couple times. His low center of gravity helps him out in terms of being a fluid guy getting out of his breaks. And so he does a good job in tracking the football in that regard. So I'm excited to see how it's going to work out when the vets get there. And Cordell Flott is another one, strictly off the fact that when you look at him and you look at what they brought in terms of undrafted rookie free agents and who they had out there as tryout guys, everybody is built like Cordell Flott. Everybody is tall, long, and slim. And so they clearly are making an emphasis to get extremely long and twitchy in the secondary. And Flott was obviously the draft pick, but his teammate, Darren Evans, who also played at Nichols, also looked well. And so for me, you can see where the philosophy is changing within how they want to attack this secondary with the length that everybody out there was like. If you just took the numbers off the jersey, everyone was built like Cordell Flott, and it was interesting to see. But you clearly can see the shift in philosophy in the secondary.
Absolutely, and it'll be interesting to see because I know there's been talk that Flott wants to put on another 20 pounds before he gets to camp or by the end of camp or whatever. And I keep trying to tell people 20 pounds is not easy to put on. Like, it's hard to take off, but 20, like a good 20 pounds, like a healthy 20 pounds that doesn't just sit around the midsection or sit in the wrong areas that won't affect your athleticism, that's difficult to put on. So it'll be interesting to see how Flott continues to develop. I think a more realistic thing would be probably around 8 pounds, 10 pounds at the most if he puts on this year, and then maybe fills out over the next few years if he's given that opportunity. But it'll be interesting. I think you're right. The philosophy seems to be going with a different style of cornerback than they've gone with in the past. And let's hope so, because you got to be able to check people if you're going to be blitzing all over the place like Wink likes to do. You mentioned something about Evans, the undrafted free agent. Out of all of those undrafted free agents and the $1 billion rookie signees or free agent signees that they have just for the rookie mini camp. Who stood out to you more? Was it Evans, or were there other people who really stood out to you?
It was it was a bunch of people that was undrafted that you kind of saw making plays. Evans and Trenton Thompson out of San Diego State, uh, undrafted guys stood out. Zion Gilbert out of FAU stood out. Trent Thompson was my number 6 combo safety, so he can play anywhere in the secondary. Zion Gilbert is someone that had a fairly good grade on 75 grade, which is solid. He was out there making plays. Another 6'3", 178-pound corner, and I was fascinated to watch the two tight ends. They first of all, you see a type at tight end. They had a lot of guys that was over 6'7", but the one guy, Austin Allen out of Nebraska, was impressive. He had a really good NFLPA game. Andre Miller was a receiver at Maine. They're transitioning him to tight end, and so he's going to be tight end as well. And so getting a look there for him, along with the fullback Jeremiah Hall, who was my number 1 fullback out of Oklahoma. I mean, this is someone that can be a single back. He is lined up in line. He's able to line up in the slot. He can catch the ball, out of the backfield, going deep down the sideline or whatnot. He had a really good catch, during 7-on-7 period as well. He stood out to me a lot in conjunction with Jay Sean Corbin, the running back out of Florida State, who was also getting work as a punt returner, kickoff returner, but he showed some ability, showed the elusiveness that he showed at Florida State. So it was a bunch of, it was impressive to see. It was tough for the receivers to stand out because it wasn't really the one-on-one periods. I mean, Dalen Baldwin was a tryout guy coming from Michigan. He had a really good catch. I also thought that Isaiah Johnson-Mack, who was also a tryout guy at tight end, had a really good 2 days out there on the field. But we'll see if those guys end up getting signed to contracts going into training camp. But those are some of the guys from an undrafted standpoint, because you're right, it was a bunch of them, but those were the guys to me that really stood out and made an impression.
And I know we spoke about this before, and I wish there was something more that the NFL could do. I don't like the rookie mini camp, not because I don't think that the rookies should be able to get in and get better acclimated to the playbook, which we know that this is really what it's for, right? It's to get everything sized up, start to get acclimated to the playbook. But the idea that they were holding 50 something, young men at this mini camp, but we know that most of those guys are just there for the 2 days. To me, I don't think there's any way you can get a legitimate evaluation of a guy when you've only seen them for 2 days without helmets and shoulder pads in. Like, if you wanted to say, hey, we don't want to risk our rookies, why not put shoulder pads and helmets and full pads on all of the rest of the rookies? Extend it out maybe a day or two and give those young men the opportunity to really show you what they have in some competitive live situations. And if you don't want to play, or if you don't want to put your drafted rookies or even your priority undrafted free agents in there, really give those guys an opportunity to shine. I think that there's some jewels that they might miss out on that they've looked up into just because the draft was so deep this year, that if they saw them perform in actual live situations, they may notice something that they didn't notice before.
It's so hard for the O-line, D-line, because your job is predicated on physicality, being able to run block, being able to stop the run, being able to get off blocks. And you can't show any of that, in just helmets. And so I felt for those guys out there. And to your point, I thought that's a great idea where, you have to have some sort of, I thought we would see more one-on-ones. At least that's a way for you to get a good look at the corner or the receiver and coverage and how they match up and can they keep up consistently with the matchups. But to have 1 7-on-7 period and, one team period, it's really tough for guys to make that much of an impression as a tryout guy to really make an impact. Because again, like I said, Isaiah Johnson-Mack was someone who had a couple of good catches. but that was about it. You really couldn't get an extended look at him because you have 15 tight ends out there, and you're trying to get guys that you either drafted or have signed as a priority free agent a real look in terms of getting them into the system, seeing how they respond. And I mean, it's just tough, but it's really tough for the O line, D line because you really are limited in what you can show based off the situation and what your position entails.
Yeah, it's definitely a difficult thing. I wish they could do something more, if for no other reason than to just extend the dream and let these young men know that this was more than just a free trip to New York, and or New Jersey, and give them the opportunity to really have a chance to put their best foot forward. Um, we talked about the QB dilemma. There was only one quarterback there. We saw at one point in time Joe Shane, and people don't hit me in the comments because I said Sean. I get it. It's Shane. I didn't tell him to spell the name that way. That's on him. Joe Shane was out there throwing passes. By the way, they were saying he was throwing. They were bad passes. They were really awful passes. He should never do that again. Just be a GM, my guy. But there was only one quarterback there, and Brian Dable had said something as if, well, that was the plan, but then you had posted something saying that really wasn't the case, and then we had spoken about it, and I wanted you to explain why there was only one quarterback at the rookie minicamp.
Yeah, the plan was to bring in Trey Ford out of University of Waterloo, who was the number one quarterback prospect, Canadian prospect at the position. And you pointed out that he was the first Canadian quarterback taken in the first round in 4 decades.
Four
So
decades.
that tells you a lot of what the CFL thought about him, what the Edmonton Elks thought about him. And, it's if you quiet as kept, just to get sidetracked for a minute, um, G. Roy Simon is one of the best scouts out there. He's an assistant GM now, elevated to that role for Edmonton. And you look at the quarterback depth chart that he has brought in this offseason. They draft Trey Ford in the first round. They bring in Keon Howard out of UT Martin. They bring in Cordell Jones, who last was in the XFL. They bring in Mike Beaudry out of University of Idaho, who was a very good quarterback in his own right at the University of Idaho. So he understands they got to get that position right. And so Trey Ford was going to be that guy for the Giants. He had, he was on top 30 visits with the Browns and Steelers. So he had some NFL buzz and the Bengals as well, too, because of his athleticism. He was at the Ravens rookie minicamp on a tryout basis, got a chance to get an extended look at quarterback there. I believe he was with the Jets also in that same role at quarterback. Giants were going to bring him in and also have him do receiver drills. That's when he just cut it short and said, you know what? I'd rather get up to Edmonton and just get started on the playbook and get started on working with my team as opposed to putting something on film that I know I'm a quarterback that's athletic. I am not an athlete who plays quarterback, and I wanted to keep it that way. So that's why he turned the Giants down and headed up to Edmonton, which is why they only had the one quarterback, Brian Lewerke, out there throwing passes.
And again, I think it's to the detriment of the receivers who are trying out. The receivers and the tight ends, because now you only have Lewerke. You're throwing his arm out of the socket because he's the only one out there that's a legitimate thrower of the ball. You've got coaches and GMs throwing the other passes, and now you're asking these wide receivers and tight ends who really came here to try to impress you to catch balls from a guy they're never going to catch balls from in a regular setting. I thought that was a miss. I thought that was a miss on the Giants' part to even ask him to play another position when you already have all of these. Even if you thought he could be a receiver, you don't need to see that in minicamp, because I believe the hustle is if you could have your third quarterback also be somebody who operated as another position, i.e. Webb, or with the Saints, Taysom Hill, then that allows you to kind of hustle an extra roster spot that you don't have to have. And now at an emergency, you didn't only just dress two quarterbacks. Now you have legitimately three, but that third one gives you plus because he can do something else for you. You don't have to see that in minicamp. I think we all know how athletic this young man is. That's why he was the first quarterback taken in 40 years in the first round. So the idea that they go into the rookie minicamp with only one quarterback was something that I thought was really a miss. And does it hurt them long term in the grand scheme of things? No. But if we're talking about a regime doing things differently and we're giving them kudos because they took pictures of all of the, because they took pictures of all of the rookies and not just of the draft, of the draftees, then we should also point out this was a miss. And
especially when that guy is comparatively similar to Tyrod Taylor.
he has athleticism like both quarterbacks. So he fits into what you're doing within the system. So much better than Brian Lewerke does, and so I don't think there's any chance Brian Lewerke makes this team. And so the fact that he's out there, but you wanted, this young man to come in and do wide receiver reps when he's not a wide receiver, it was a miss. Is it a big deal? Grand scheme, probably not. Is it a miss? Yeah. Is it unfortunate for those guys that came to try out with the Giants? Absolutely. I want to get you out of here on here a little bit of rapid fire. Number one, did you happen to see Marcus McKeithen and Evan Neal standing next to each other? Is that the most intimidating two offensive linemen together in the NFL?
I can't say I got a chance to see that. Based off how far away the O-line was practicing and the brief glimpse of team that we got. So I can't honestly say I got to see them standing next to each other.
I just keep envisioning a world because I think McKeithen was a sneaky good pick late because I think he has some conditioning issues that he needs to work out. I think he's got to get himself in better shape, but he is massive and Neal is massive. And when you put those two guys on the right side, no offense to all of these free agent guys that they brought in that are pretty much stopgap guys, I think the goal is to have the two North Carolina guys at guard. And maybe not this year, but in the future. But if you're talking about putting a right side together with McKeithen and with Neal, that's an intimidating right side. I don't care who you line. You can line Lawrence Taylor up over there. That's an intimidating two big, gigantic offensive linemen standing in front of you. Second thing, who do you believe of the undrafted free agents, or maybe even like a guy who came in on a rookie minicamp contract? Who do you think has the best opportunity to make this team?
Jashaun Corbin, because he is the second best back on this roster already, in my opinion. Obviously, I may be a little biased because he was my number one back coming into the draft, but just looking at the Giants depth chart, Breida is someone that's, he's probably stylistically similar to Corbin, but Corbin is younger, better, and healthier. We know Breida tends to miss a lot of time, so I think Corbin, just by the sheer depth chart, has the most opportunity. The fullback is different because Hall is penciled in right now as a starter. So he technically could be the right answer, but I think Corbin, based off, a true look at which undrafted free agent got a legitimate shot, I feel like he's the RB2 in this backfield.
I think what'll be interesting is A, how many backs they're gonna carry, and B, if the difference between Corbin isn't that much, do you just keep him because he's cheaper?
Dollars and cents.
A lot of times that's all you need in order to make a roster is to be the cheaper option of the two and give similar qualities. So that's good. Last thing, when they get together for their next mini camp, what's the one thing you're looking forward to seeing come out of that mini camp?
I want to see how this secondary matches up versus the receiving core, because there's not a lot of size in the Giants receiving core. There's a lot of quickness, but there's a lot of size and length in the secondary. So it's a contrast in styles. You have the shorter, shiftier receivers going against a longer, lengthier, aggressive guys. So a lot of these guys can press, but you want to see how these taller corners can move. And the Giants receiving core is outside of Kenny Galladay is going to give them that challenge and that test. So that's going to be a fun matchup to watch.
I appreciate. You know what? I just thought of one thing. So to me, I think Dane Belton is an interesting draft pick because I like the skills that he brings to the table. But I think he's kind of like a hidden outside linebacker. If we're being real about it, he's not really a safety. He reminds me a lot of Jabril Peppers and how they were using Jabril Peppers, but maybe not as athletic as Peppers. Do you foresee him being someone that can really make an impact early because he has that ability to cover, especially at the intermediate level? Or do you think it's going to be a situation where he struggles because he's not a true, legitimate, like back half safety?
It's funny you bring him up because he was on the podium and he was getting questions, and we kind of got it out of him that he was calling the defense, he was calling the secondary. They had him working both sides, and it's in Wink Martindale's defense is left and right safety. Mm-hmm. So he's working both, and he's getting guys lined up. He's making calls and checks, and so they kind of view him as that vocal piece, that addition of the coaching staff, extension of the coaching staff out there on the field. So that's going to be fun to watch play out, because you're right, he's not technically a deep third guy. He's more of a rover type. Play a little bit of that at Iowa. That's probably where they see him, kind of like what we saw Xavier McKinney do when he got healthy during his rookie year, and on the back end of the season, kind of moved him around a lot, in addition to moving around Jabril Pepper. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think that might be the plan for him, outside of him being a heady football player, to where he's probably wearing the mic and the helmet as well.
Awesome. Emory, I really do appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you check out Emory Hunt on all of the many things that he does. You can find him on CBS Sports. You can find him on his YouTube channel, on the Football Game Plan Network. Make sure that you go, if you haven't already. It's still hella useful when you think about all of these new names. Go out and get that 2022 draft guide. It is full of names that you will not find in anyone else's draft guide. Over 1,000 prospects, and I know that he's already turned his attention to 2023. Emory, I really do appreciate it. We got to talk some generals and what they've done in the future, because I see you wearing the USFL shirt. I think that they've turned the corner that's going to make them really difficult to beat, because they just will relentlessly pound you. And I know that there's a lot of Giants fans that are also starting to pay a little attention to the generals as well. We'll get to that another time. I really do appreciate it.
Appreciate you, man.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, that's another episode of A Giant Issue. I'm Coach Gene Clemens. You know where to find me. Right here exclusively at 6 p.m. every Monday on my YouTube channel, Coach Gene Clemens. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, make sure you leave a comment. We want to hear from you. Hit that little bell so you know when it's coming. And until next time, peace.